Hello, I'm Ryan Sharp, and welcome to the Saturday Morning Patriot Pulpit Podcast. Today we're going to talk about the election process. Now, this has been in the news a lot lately. Obviously, Trump is not satisfied with it. But the election process in the United States has lasted for a long time now. And unfortunately, though, I do believe, I'm not going to go as far as Trump and his lawyers go, but I do believe there is election fraud. And that's very clear from certain elections in the past, even going back to 1980 when my grandpa worked the elections, and he was a poll worker for years and years. And as a farmer in Missouri, he grew up a Republican, very staunch Republican, actually. And in the early 80s, he caught the Republican Party stuffing the ballot box, and it forever changed his political viewpoint. Now, I don't agree that going to the other side is the answer. He became a staunch Democrat, but I do understand the anger because I've sensed that myself. I have tremendous anger at both of the parties. That's why I have not supported either party in 25 years, and I believe we should vote on a core set of principles, and those principles are the same principles that George Washington and the founders said that we should operate and vote on. And so that's how I vote, and I would urge you to do the same. So that's the real answer for the problem is, first of all, we've got to quit supporting the lesser of two evils. We need to actually vote with a clear conscience. We need to vote for life. We need to vote for the liberty, pursuit of happiness, protection of private property, protection of gun rights, all the things that are in the Constitution that are our rights, unalienable rights. We, the people, must protect those by our vote, and we're not doing it. We are selling our vote every day to the lip service of either one of the two parties. All it is lip service, and then you look at their actual fruit and actually look at the policy and look at what they actually produce, and it's communist crap. So the real answer is not necessarily election reform, although that is vital. But if the American people are not going to vote properly anyway, then all the election reform in the world is not going to save our country. We can have perfectly fair and honest open elections, and every vote can be counted. But if we're going to vote for the Hitler A or Hitler B, then we're already going to hell in a handbasket. So I want to preface everything by saying that first, that the ultimate vote is up to the people. Now, that being said, we do need the mechanism to have a fair and honest vote. Through the years, we've seen computers come into effect where we do know from testing that has been done in Broward County here in Florida and other places that when they plugged in the numbers and they did a kind of a trial run with the election, and they said, okay, we're going to have 5 votes for Bush and 20 for Gore, or we're going to choose candidate A, candidate B, and then we're going to see what the computer comes back with. When they've done those kind of tests, they have shown that the computer completely is off, and it throws the numbers randomly into with the opposite effect as what it should have. So that's just a fact, and we know that the computers can be programmed to pretty much give you the outcome that you want. And so a couple years back, we had a Constitution Revision Commission, which I believe was unconstitutional because the governor appointed everyone for the commission, and that's not the way it's supposed to be done. Nonetheless, they put this commission together, and they were going to revise the Florida Constitution. Well, I went to Fort Myers and prepared a speech before the commission, and the crux of the commission was to testify that myself and thousands of other Floridians were denied our representation in the last election because the man that we wanted to vote for and the man that was qualified to run for president and the man I single-handedly got on the ballot in 2012, the governor's office, Governor Rick Scott, decided, we're going to keep Tom Hoefling and 6 other qualified candidates off the ballot. Had no reason, no legal reason they could do it. They just did it. They're, used mob tactics and basically suppressed our will and our representation. So I made that very clear to them first. Sure, they didn't like that coming out. Of course, I also put a press release out to 252 outlets in Florida. Now, only one paper, the Naples Daily News, covered the story. Surprise, surprise. That's why I will continue to preach the media is false. I do agree with Trump on that. The media is phony. They have a narrative that they have been pushing for years, and it is not the facts. The facts are buried. The facts are hidden. They do not want you to hear the facts. That's what this podcast is all about. So, getting back to elections, what I proposed is very straightforward, very simple, and I think it would go a long way in fixing the election process. So what I propose is, now in most states, they simply make it very, very difficult for a candidate to get on the ballot. In Florida here, they have poll taxes, which you got to pay at least $3,000 all the way up to $30,000, depending on what office you run for, just to get your name on the ballot. The only other way to do it is you got to have, hundreds of dollars and, all the time in the world to actually go and collect ballots. So it's not easy. So, first of all, I addressed that issue. I said, look, Article 1, Section 1 of the Florida Constitution guarantees the right of representation for every citizen. That means that if I want to support somebody for any office I want to, then I should be able to do so. And I shouldn't have to go through hoops, and he shouldn't have to have a ton of money to get on the ballot. So the first proposal I made is that the state regulate the fee to get on the ballot in whatever office it is to $75. $75 basically is enough to let somebody know that they're serious, they want to run, but it's also not prohibitive to somebody that doesn't have a lot of income. So $75 fee to run. The other thing is you only need one signature requirement because, again, Article 1, Section 1 says I have the right of representation. So therefore, if I have somebody that wants to nominate me and wants me to be their supervisor of elections, their governor, whatever the case is, then I should be able to vote for that person. So I should have one person to vouch for me that says, yes, he's a viable person, he's a real person, he is somebody I want to support, and that should be it. So one signature, one witness to come with you, one signature requirement, and then $75 filing fee. Now, you also have to prove that you're qualified for the office. Therefore, you have to show a birth certificate. You have to, for instance, for president, you have to be 35 years of age. You have to be a natural-born citizen. And in the last 3 or 4 elections, we've had a multitude of guys that are not even legally qualified to run. Marco Rubio being one, Barack Obama being another. They like to, call us a bunch of fearmongers, and they like to demonize us for saying it. But the fact is, those guys were not legally qualified to run because they were not natural-born citizens. Got to be born in the United States, and it also, the founders would define it as natural-born, is that your father, not your mother, but your father has to be born in the United States to be a natural-born citizen. So that's a whole other issue, but it's a critical issue that we need to get addressed, and we need to make sure that the people that are running are not a bunch of damn foreign agents, which is what we have currently. So that's the first proposal I made. The next proposal is very simple. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you the proposal, and then I'll explain why it is what it is, why I set it up this way. It says if the number, these were statutes I said needed to be added to the election statutes in the Constitution. I said if the number of candidates for a certain office are 9 or fewer, okay, 9 or fewer candidates for whatever office it is, then every single one of the candidates must be printed on the ballot in alphabetical order according to the person's last name. So we're not going to put the Democrat and Republican at the top of the ticket anymore. The other thing is we don't want party labels on the ballot. No party labels. We get rid of the party labels. We just put the names in alphabetical order according to their last name if it's 9 or fewer. So if you got 9 candidates running for governor, you print them all there equally and fairly. If you got 9 running for supervisor of elections or even airport authority, something local, you print them all fairly. Now, here's the key. If the number of candidates is 10 or more for a particular office, then nobody gets printed, and you have a write-in line provided. That's it. A write-in line is provided if you have 10 or more candidates, and then you have a list. You can have a separate list if you want on the internet, and a write-in line is provided. So if you have, there's been instances where we've had 12 or 13 candidates run for governor, for instance, or even U.S. Senate. We've had that issue happen. So in those cases, under my proposal, none of those names would be printed, and you would have a write-in line provided. Now, that does a couple things. First of all, it gets rid of the segregation and the discrimination against write-in candidates, which are often financially just people that don't have the party backing. Okay, so it gets rid of the discrimination against those candidates versus the big party candidates. That's the first thing it does. It forces then, by having the write-in, most likely on most ballots around the county, it forces the old-fashioned counting method so that the people actually have to count the votes as opposed to go by the computer vote. Okay? Now, my proposal didn't go into all that detail about how there's other things I've since thought would actually prevent fraud and other things from going on, but that's very simply what I proposed, and I believe that would take care of most of the problems. The other beauty of this is it actually gets rid of the primaries, because primaries, I've always argued, are private functions, okay? Those should not be public functions because those parties are private. They're private. They're not public. And so if my party, the America's Party, wants to have a candidate, we shouldn't get money from the public who has no interest in supporting our candidate. We should not get money from you guys to nominate our candidate. And we never have. We never have accepted public funds. And we actually have our own convention. We nominate our own candidates, and that's the way all parties operate. But for some reason, the Republicans and Democrats are getting my tax dollars to fund their conventions when I don't even support them. I don't want to support them. I have no use for either one of them. So that's the biggest thing. Somebody needs to file a lawsuit against the fact that we got to pay for primaries, because those should not be public. Those should be taken care of by the parties. The bottom line is they don't listen anyway. Okay, we voted for Dr. Alan Keyes in 2000. They stonewalled him at the convention, made sure that Bush was the nominee. In 2004, Ron Paul, they didn't count his votes, and I'm not a Ron Paul supporter, but I did tell those folks they would not count his votes. And sure enough, they did not count Ron Paul's votes at the convention. Every year, 2008, we had Rick Santorum. They wouldn't count his votes. Romney changed the rules to where they only had a voice vote, and then of course in 2016 they literally they had a voice vote, and they literally ignored the cry of the people on the floor, the delegates. The delegates marched out of the convention hall, where they were met with mobsters, literally in suits, from the Trump administration that said, "What do you think you're doing? If you don't get back in there, you're going to be hurting." They physically threatened the delegates. So when they come back from commercial on television, you see the delegates coming back into the room after you just saw a mass exodus. So the bottom line is the conventions is a rigged process. It's a bully pulpit. It's absolutely ridiculous, and we should not be having to fund that publicly. So I want to get rid of the primaries altogether. That said, I'm not in favor of the amendment here in Florida that was just voted on. Thank God it failed. But it would have basically only allowed 2 candidates on the ballot, because the top 2 vote getters, which obviously probably is going to be your Democrat and Republican, would have ended up on the ballot. And so all those other choices are disenfranchised. So I absolutely not for that. That's unconstitutional, clearly unconstitutional to do it that way. But at the same time, let's have a general election, get rid of the God blessed primaries, okay, and put everybody on the ballot, and according to their name, no parties mentioned. Okay, if somebody is not smart enough to know who the hell they're voting for and what party they represent, they shouldn't be voting. The other part with the write-in, if a person can't even spell the name of the person they want to vote to run the highest office in our land, they shouldn't be voting. So by having a write-in, it forces voters to be smarter. They have to know the candidates a little bit more. They can't just say, well, I'm going to vote Republican straight ticket, or I'm going to vote Democrat straight ticket. They can't do that. They have to know the candidates personally in order to know who is for what party. So I'll never change this viewpoint. This is the answer to the problems for any state, any county, whatever it is. I'm telling you right now, my proposal will work. Now, there's other things that we can do to prevent fraud, because even my proposal doesn't address the fact that people in the back room could falsify the vote. So what I propose, I was thinking about it the other day, is we know in Philadelphia, okay, what the process that occurred was after the vote was counted, the ballots were taken to a special building where there were a series of card tables, 6-foot card tables set up. And at the table you had a Republican, you had a Democrat, and then you had 3 separate actual counters. And the way they do it is they go from one person who says, yes, this is a Trump vote, to the next person, yes, this is a Trump vote. And if one of them says, no, I can't tell who the vote's for, they can put it in a questionable pile. So what happened in Philadelphia, everything was normal, and this is direct testimony from a lady that was actually in the at the tables, saw the process. She said everything was great when it first started, and then around 11 o'clock at night, the guy that was the Democrat in line, he started pulling every ballot and saying, well, I think there's a question on this one. There's a question on this one. So pretty soon those ballots became put in a separate pile, and they were taken off somewhere and never heard from again. So what I'm proposing is we do away with that entire process of allowing the Republican and Democrat to be in that room. Okay, the other problem I have is there was no independent in there. No independent. There should have been a qualified NPA next to the Republican and Democrat. Okay, but let's cut that whole process out. Okay, and let's get regular people that have been vetted, and we know their voting record, we know their citizenship record, all these things. Let's continue the count process, but let's get the Republican agent and the Democrat agent out of that room. And what we'll do is we'll put them in the front lines where they have to face the voter directly. So what happens is after you vote, okay, you take your ballot up to where normally you stick it in the scanner and somebody helps you put it in the scanner, or some states, they'll actually put it in the scanner for you, and then, that's it. So what I'm proposing is let's get it all out in front so the people can see the kind of assholes that are causing the problem in the first place directly. And that way they can't suppress the vote, because so what happens, you come up, and it would slow down the process to some extent, but we can handle it. It's not, believe me, it's not going to slow down the process like it currently is, because The current process is an absolute fraudulent mess. So what happens, you come up with your ballot after you've voted, and you have a 6-foot card table. You hand it to the first person, who is a registered Republican. Okay? He looks at it, he says, well, it looks like to me you voted, sir, did you vote for Joe Biden? Yes, I did. He marks it down. He marks an official voter's card down that says exactly who you voted for. Then it goes to the next guy, who is a registered Democrat. And he says, it looks to me like, sir, you voted for Biden. Looks like you voted for this guy for whatever. Or the other way to do it is he just simply marks what he says you voted for. He shows it to you, and you sign off on it. Yes, that's what I voted for. Then it goes to an independent, an NPA. He does the same thing. So you have 3 checks and balances right there up front, where they have no further contesting of your ballot. They cannot contest your ballot at that point. They have just testified with you directly. Okay. By the way, after you've been checked for an ID, we have to have an ID system. Absolutely must have an ID in every state and every county. That's the first thing. But on top of it, we now have 3 checks and balances of people that can testify that you are who you say you are. Plus, they also have had the opportunity up front with you to contest your ballot. So they can't screw with it after this. They sign off. They pass the card down to the scanner. The lady scans your ballot if you're a computer ballot. Okay. The machine prints off a receipt that shows you who you voted for. Okay. And then you certify your vote. You say, yes, the computer scanned this correctly, and yes, I am satisfied with that my vote is being counted. And you have a receipt then, so that if for some reason your vote, which is tracked, is not counted, then you can file a lawsuit and say, look, here's my receipt, and yet they didn't count my vote. So I don't have all the logistics worked out, but I believe that would take care of the fraud. It's not going to slow down the process as much as it is now, because you're putting all the possible fraud up front. So again, no Republicans, no Democrats, nobody of any party will be allowed in the counting room after the election day. They have to come right up front. They have to do the process up front. So there can be no hanging chads or no thrown out ballots at that point. So that's my proposal. So again, let me just recap. And I'm going to encourage you guys to call your senators and reps and actually propose these proposals to them and fight for these proposals, because this is the only way we're going to secure our elections. So again, very simple. $75 fee for filing for a candidate. If you want to run for President of the United States, or if you want to run for the dog catcher, it's still $75 as a citizen of this country. One signature. You need one signature. That could be your wife, could be anybody, your best friend, whoever. But if you got one person that says, yes, I want to vote for this person for a certain office, he signs his name, and that's it. And you're on the ballot, and they can't do anything. And by being on the ballot means you will be printed if there are 9 or fewer candidates for a particular office. Okay? If there are 10 or more candidates for a particular office, then nobody is listed. You have a write-in line. Everybody has an opportunity to be written in. Again, you force them to count the write-ins, because currently the fact is, I've caught them red-handed. We've got people that I know that have actually studied this and went to their counties and actually proven that they do not count the write-in votes. We have candidates, I single-handedly put on the ballot here in Florida, went to the supervisor of elections, looked at the results, and he had no votes recorded, and I guarantee I voted for him, my wife voted for him, and 12 other people in my county, yet nothing. So they don't count the write-ins. Okay, that's a fact. And actually, I confronted the supervisor of election, and his response was, "Well, he couldn't win. He's not going to win anyway." That was his excuse. Now, if I had the money, I would have sued the supervisor of elections for disenfranchisement. By the way, that is another viable choice here that I'm advocating for. If you have a lawyer, constitutional lawyer, that you can send my way, I'm ready to file a lawsuit for disenfranchisement on behalf of myself and thousands of other Floridians who were denied our First Amendment Article 1, Section 1 right of representation. I'm ready to file that lawsuit. I hope others will pick up the mantle and will file lawsuits in their state if indeed they were disenfranchised and not allowed to support the candidate they wanted to support. Because there's a lot of candidates, a lot of citizens out there who simply will not support a man that says it's okay to butcher babies, which Joe Biden and Donald Trump said have that in common. Now, they pay lip service differently, but the fact is, policy-wise, they're both butchering babies, and they're not acceptable for my vote, or for anyone's in that matter. So we should have our vote counted, and we do have the right of representation. So if they're not going to provide that through fixing the election process, then the next step, we got to file lawsuits. Now, the other thing is we got to, again, all the election reform in the world, all the checks and balances in the world are not going to stop a dictatorship or a communist country from taking shape, because it's ultimately in the hands of the people. And if the people are so ignorant that they're going to go out and support people like Joe Biden and Donald Trump for president, then we're already screwed anyway. We don't have a country to look forward to, because we are just handing it over to the corporate interests and the dictatorships and all the other, China and everybody else. We need to vote based on a core set of fundamental principles that George Washington and our founders laid down for us, and that God himself instituted government. And we need to follow those principles if we're going to have a secure government. So I can't emphasize that enough, that all the election reform in the world is not going to fix immoral people. And our founders even said that. This country cannot survive if indeed our people become immoral. So we got to get on our knees. We got to get back to the basics. We got to get back to trusting God that all life is equally valuable and created and in need of protection. And we need to do that. Now, all right, I think I've rambled on long enough. So let me go to some chatters here. We have Carlin from Washington State. And Carlin says, when I was in Iraq, thank you for serving, Carlin. He says, when I was in Iraq during the first elections after the fall of Saddam Hussein, voters had to physically go to the polling place, produce ID, which, as I understand it, is given to citizens at a certain age, dip their index finger into dye that would last several days. Then they cast their votes. The dye was used to prevent voters from going to another poll and casting another vote. I would like to see a system like this put in place in the U.S. No electronic voting. Ballots could easily be made in such a way that they could be counted. Sorry, this is kind of hard to read this. But anyway, he says ballots could easily be made in such a way that they could be counted by a machine similar to money counters. Of course, there are details involved. I'm not going to type them all out here. And he says we need election form regarding the candidates for different offices, referendums, etc. But he says it's doable. So those are the kind of voices we need to hear. We need to hear from Carlin. We need to hear from people that have been overseas and served our military and actually have seen I don't want to say, but a Republican progress and how elections are instituted and how they are checked. For God's sakes, if they can have ID in Iraq where people don't even drive, and most of them don't even have nothing but a mud floor. If we can ID those people, for God's sakes, we ought to be able to ID everybody in the United States in order to vote. Now, I oppose Verify. I oppose what's coming down the pipe with COVID, where you're going to have an ID card that says whether you were vaccinated or not. I oppose those things. However, when it comes to voting, okay, I want a picture ID. I want people to have to show an ID, and I want checks and balances to make sure that those people did not vote in another state or vote elsewhere. There needs to be more checks and balances. So anyway, those are my proposals. I would encourage you to give me a call. My direct line is 727-798-1101. That's 727-798-1101. Let me know what you think of my proposals today. Let me know what you think of the show. And then certainly check out my other podcasts from the previous weeks. We've covered a lot of different issues, and we'll continue to cover them. And so long as we can get you guys to support the show, we'll continue to be here. So go to patriotpulpit.org. That's patriotpulpit.org, and click the donate link. Even $5 or $10 will help us to continue to do this. It does take time. It does take preparation. In fact, Nicholas Smeek is my researcher, and he got me prepared and helped me get research for this week and every week. So kudos to him. Part of your donations go to Nick so he can continue to take the time to research, because shows like this do take a fair amount of preparation and time, some more than others, especially when we dig into bills like we did a couple weeks ago, and we have to study the bills and also study statements by candidates and other people in office. It does take time, and so we really do appreciate anything you can do to help us out. Thank you very much. This has been the Saturday Morning Patriot Pulpit Podcast with Ryan Sharp, and I want to wish you guys a Happy New Year and a blessed day. Thank you.